I have always been civil with my half-brother. We were close as kids, but he started to have an attitude at 13 and pretty much stopped being nice, and started messing with my things / making fun of me and doing pranks to annoy me / privacy was gone with him coming into my room and taking my things. Whenever I complained, my stepmom would normalize his behavior and make excuses. My dad never really grounded him and thought that talking to him will get him to behave better. I'm currently in college. I live in a rented apartment and have car to help me get to the university or other places. The car isn't expensive or fancy at all. I saved up for it 2 years ago. I decided to have Christmas dinner with my family. It's the perfect opportunity to be with family since I haven't seen my dad in a while. I arrived at my dad's house and left my purse and my keys on the kitchen island after my stepmom told me to help with dinner. My half-brother started talking about my car in the kitchen while my stepmom was listening and asked if he could take it for a couple of hours to hang out with friends. I politely told him no. He threw a fit and brought up how I needed to relax and not worry, but my answer was still the same. While we were sitting at the dinner table, my half-brother got up, washed his hands, and I thought he went outside. I got busy talking to my dad, and after I got up to wash my hands, I noticed my car keys weren't there. I went outside to ask him, and neither he nor my car were there. I lost it. I started calling his phone, but he hung up on me several times. I was furious. I told my dad I'd call the police if he didn't come back with the car. My stepmom jumped to defend him and said I was being unreasonable to call the police. I called him one last time, then I called the police. My stepmom freaked out when my half-brother got picked up by the police. She told me to go explain the situation to the authorities, otherwise he'd spend the night in jail. But I refused, especially since I still hadn't got my car back. Stepmom yelled that I ruined dinner and that it was no big deal. He was going to return it after borrowing it from me, but he didn't really borrow it, and she heard me say no. I don't know what she told the police, but I didn't give permission to use the car. My stepmom's side of family are mad at me for doing this to my brother and hinted that I don't consider him family. My dad's side of family sided with me, saying he deserved it. My dad said I overreacted and I shouldn't have called the police when he disappeared for 4 hours. I talked to the police about what happened, and I learned later that my stepmom said that her son was allowed to borrow it, and that it was a misunderstanding. I wasn't going to let her continue to lie, but my dad told me to back off and let it go. This really upset me. My half-brother wasn't even berated the way I was by the family. I have 2 sisters that I'm close with. I also have a niece, Leah. Leah's 16, and after my ex-wife decided to split up and divorce due to infertility problems that lasted for 5 years, I started a college fund for Leah to help her go to her chosen college. That was in 2019. Now I visit my mother's home, where my sister and Leah are living, every week to spend the weekend together. This past weekend I was asleep upstairs while my mother, my sister, and Leah were in the kitchen. I came downstairs to grab a glass of water and heard my sister talking about my ex-wife expecting a baby with her new husband. This struck a nerve and I kind of froze from shock. I then heard Leah react to the news repeatedly, saying, "I told you so, I told you so." Then explained she's always thought that I was the one with a problem for not being able to have a baby with my ex, but that I was too afraid to admit due to fragile masculinity. I could not believe what she said, but what made it worse is her following statement about how my ex was smart to get a divorce before it was too late. I went upstairs and into the room and shut the door and stayed there for hours. Mom and sister saw me about to leave and insisted to know what the problem was. I didn't want to argue, but I told them that I heard what Leah said about me. Leah stopped eating and got quiet. My sister tried to play dumb, but I told her I heard their entire conversation about my ex-wife and her pregnancy news. My sister tried to backpedal, saying Leah is just a kid who doesn't know much about this stuff and was just spouting nonsense. I told them I don't want to talk about it, and they refused to let me leave, but I left eventually. I later sent my sister a text telling her about how hurt and devastated I was because of what Leah said, and told her I will no longer be responsible for funding her education. My sister kept trying to call, then texted saying Leah didn't mean what she said and offered to make her apologize, but I didn't feel comfortable being in the same room with someone who blamed me for something that was out of my control and something that literally turned my life upside down. My mother tried to get me to come over so we could talk, saying Leah doesn't deserve me turning my back on her like that. I haven't seen my sister nor Leah after what happened. But they are still trying to contact me, which means there's still a room for a discussion, and so I've decided to go see them tomorrow. Sit down together and have a long conversation. But this. I admit that I was mad when I told my sister about the college fund cancellation. I love Leah so much and see her as my own daughter. Unfortunately, her dad, my brother-in-law, is deceased, and so I understand losing a parent at a young age and relate to the kind of hurt she carries inside. Lost my father in an accident when I was 11, and I think that sitting down and talking things out is the best option before I make any decision. Also, one more thing to clarify, both my ex-wife and I were having these fertility issues. Both sides, but since my ex-wife got pregnant soon after her new marriage, then my family thought that I was the problem originally. It is what it is, and I'm learning to not words get in my head so easily. I'm not mad at anyone, I'm just trying to move on with my life like anybody else. My brother and I do not get on. When we were younger, he'd go out of his way to make my life a living hell. To my parents' credit, they did tell him off for it when they caught him, but they both worked long hours and didn't have the energy to deal with our arguments. This continued into adulthood. He was salty that he failed his college course the first time around. There was a bad argument in our family a while ago, and it all started because I refused to decorate my brother's living room. I won't go into too much detail, but he wanted a pretty hefty discount. I said no, and he threw a tantrum. Instead of being a grown-up and talking to me, he decided to hook up with my toxic ex-girlfriend and the mother of my child. I can't go into a lot of detail about what she was like, but she was not a nice person. She never really bonded with our son when he was born, and I was left to do everything by myself. She eventually walked out on us and refused to have any contact with our son. She'll post on Facebook now and then about her beautiful baby boy to get sympathy votes, but that's about it. I have been a single dad for almost 3 years now, and I absolutely adore my son, but it hurts to think that one day he might question why his mom didn't want anything to do with him. How am I supposed to explain that to him? Anyway, it bothered me when my brother told me they'd hooked up together. It hurt even more when he started dating her. It had taken me so long to get over what she did to me and my child, and now my own brother was bringing her back into my life. Yesterday we had a family video call. Parents are high risk and we're not taking any chances. When my brother decided to announce that he and my ex were expecting, I just froze. I didn't know what to do or think. I could feel myself starting to cry a little bit, and it got a bit harder to breathe. Eventually, I decided to just congratulate them and then made up some lie about needing to put my son down for a nap and left. I received a bunch of messages from my brother and his GF telling me that I stole their thunder. After I left, my parents and some other family members started worrying if I was okay, and not really focusing on their news. My uncle told me that I should have just been a man and stuck it out instead of making excuses to get out of it. After all, it was expected that our kids would be raised around each other. I feel like maybe I shouldn't have left the call, but at the same time it would have been worse if I'd stayed and had a full-blown panic attack in front of everyone. Some of the family members are split and have argued that I won't be able to avoid my brother and his family forever, but others believe I was in the right to leave that situation. I don't know what to think. My parents aren't happy, but they don't have the energy to deal with all the hassle my brother would cause. They actually cut him off for a little while when he started dating my ex, but he phoned them constantly and, again, can't go into much detail, but he said he'd do something not so good. They keep him at arm's length, but I have told them not to cut contact because of me. If they want to cut contact on their own accord, then that's fine, but I do not want to be the reason that they have to deal with his tantrums. The rest of the family, for the most part, weren't happy about it but accepted it, or pretended to. When they started getting a bit more serious, my uncle, who told me to be a man, thought it was funny. That's just the kind of person he is. Not for my sake, but for the sake of my son. I don't want to put him through all that. My wife and I bought a 4-bedroom house in PA that my son lives in. Our son went to college in PA and wanted to stay in the area. So we bought the house as a second home. We live in NJ and commute into Manhattan for work. We figured that he would have a place to live and we could visit every so often and spend some quality time together. We pay the taxes and services / maintenance on the house. Our son pays for his groceries and the house utilities. All was going well for a few years. Our son meets a girl and they get serious. We met her and she seems nice enough. They announce their engagement and she moves into the house with our son. Now for the problem, the wedding. We hold a little get-to-know-you barbecue at the PA house. My son and daughter are there, as are our son's fiancé and her parents. And sisters. We all seem to be getting along well. My wife, daughter and the fiancé go into the house along with her mother and sisters and my son. A few minutes later my wife and daughter come out and are really upset. They come over and tell me we're leaving and driving back to NJ. I try to find out what happened. Once we get back to NJ and they calm down, they tell me that our son and his fiancée along with her family don't want us at the wedding. According to what I was told, we're not their kind of people. I was livid. I called my son and asked him WTH this was about. He tells me that her family feel that we are not good enough and will embarrass them at a family wedding, and that we are all uninvited from the wedding. I let a week go by to calm myself down and drive back to the PA house. The new future in-laws are in the house along with the fiancé. It appears that they all moved into the house. They ask me why I'm there. I tell them that since we aren't invited to the wedding, I was coming over to talk to my son. They tell me to leave their house. I lost it and told them that they had 30 days to get out. Tell my son I'm selling the house and he could find somewhere else to live with all of you. I go to a realtor in town and list the house for sale. They call my son at work and tell him what I said. Apparently they thought that he owned the house. He calls me and asks why I'm selling his house. I tell him I paid for it along with the taxes on it and it is mine. He was living there rent-free, but since he doesn't want us in his new life, he has to get out. I tell him the same as I told his future in-laws. They have 30 days to get out, then I'll get a lawyer and get them evicted. Am I the for taking a hard stance on this? He is my son, but the in-laws seem to take over and we no longer count.